Hello, beautiful! Welcome back to the Story Girl podcast, where we dream together and dive into the stories we adore. Grab a drink and some blankets, because it's time to get cozy and chat about the timeless art of storytelling. Hello, my friend. We're back, and we're here to talk about 90s and 2000s rom-coms, and I am dying to get started. For years, I have been trying to define what makes the films of the 90s so much better. I even delivered a speech in high school arguing that 90s films were superior to today's multi-million-dollar blockbusters. It's really close to my heart, this argument, that the 90s movies were better, because I have such a fond love for 90s movies, especially the historical period dramas, and of course, the rom-coms. I mean, that's why we're here today. The rom-coms. It's all about the rom-coms, you guys. It was definitely during COVID that I started to really love rom-coms. My family finally got Netflix because, well, we relate to the streaming craze. And I discovered this whole new world. It was like suddenly all of these rom-coms were available to me, and I was like, wow, these are cool, I love these, and I became so passionate about them. They were literally what got me through COVID. It became a comfort genre, and I think it's a comfort genre for a lot of people. Since then, I've discovered that, in fact, it is a comfort genre of a large population. Through Bookstagram, I have met hundreds of women of all ages, might I add, not just teenagers. We've got our middle-aged women, we've got our moms, and we all love rom-coms. Even guys like rom-coms. Some won't admit it, but they really secretly love them. So, we can all agree on one thing. The rom-coms of the 90s and early 2000s were way better than the rom-coms of our modern day. I even did a poll on my Instagram, and I discovered that, oh goodness, it was a pretty resounding percentage. I can't remember the exact percentage now, but it was at least 75%, if not more. The 90s and early 2000s rom-coms are just so popular, and everyone keeps going back to them. I mean, while doing research for this podcast episode, I learned that it's actually not that unpopular of an opinion. Not only do my Instagram followers agree with me, but a lot of people on the internet also agree with me. I found that the 90s to the early 2000s was pretty universally known as the rom-com renaissance, which is what I'm going to argue today, is that the 90s and 2000s were the rom-com renaissance. So, in order to figure out what made these rom-coms so superior, I of course started by asking you, my friends and followers, what you think makes the 90s and 2000s rom-coms so much better. So, I got lots of very similar answers, actually. A lot of you talked about originality versus agenda-driven content. Nowadays, our culture is very woke, and we want to share messages about equality, about feminism, about a lot of those very politically driven topics, which, depending on what you believe, this might not be a bad thing, but what people really want is an original story that we can just escape to and enjoy and be entertained by. We don't want that little message to be really like poking at us the whole time. We just want to enjoy ourselves. So that's one thing that I found a lot of you thought was what made 90s and 2000s rom-coms better. We also had a lot of people say importance of good acting and humor. I would argue that the actors in these 90s and 2000s rom-coms were quite a bit better than the rom-coms of today. I mean, you watch those Netflix original rom-coms, we all have seen them. We all agree that they're a little cringy. I mean, they don't exactly pick the most talented actors to play in these, and even when they do, the script is usually poorly written. So I think we can all agree that there were definitely better actors and the humor was better written. And furthermore, I mean, you guys talked a lot about wholesomeness in the storytelling and the focus on genuine connections romantically versus sexualization, which there was some of that in the 90s and 2000s rom-coms. I'm not going to tell you that all of them are 100% wholesome. I mean, if you've seen Pretty Woman, I wouldn't exactly call that the most wholesome movie ever, but there is definitely more of a focus on the emotional connection between the characters. There's not as much of a push for the sexual content, which I really appreciate because there are actually a lot of people that don't want that, and I don't think Hollywood is getting that message. So, along with that, that's kind of similar, we have traditional values and chivalry. A lot of these rom-coms were built on people with more traditional values and familial values, and there was also a pretty good balance of feminism. Like, there wasn't a very strong push for it in the extreme sense. We saw these strong female characters, but we also saw them still desiring a relationship with a man. And we saw them still wanting, love and children, which I feel like is such an important thing because feminism can become so extreme, and I feel like these rom-coms just did such a better job of having a balance. So that's what you guys think, and I completely agree with pretty much all of those. So now I also want to talk about why in general do we love rom-coms so much. So I did a little research, and I'm going to read a couple of quotes that I found on various websites about why people find rom-coms to be so enjoyable and why they're so popular. A lot of it is, it's a sense of safety. There is, and also comfort. So psychologist Pamela Rutledge says that rewatching movies provides a sense of security and safety, knowing that there's order in the world, quote unquote. She explains that rewatching a feel-good movie is a way of controlling your emotions when you're feeling overwhelmed or stressed. Watching something predictable provides us with comfort and a sense of stability. So that's what psychologist Pamela Rutledge says, and I would completely agree with that. Another thing that I found on this website here, the Elixir, I will have the links in the bottom, in the comments and everything. Dr. Bart Rossi explained why young people are a fan of romantic comedies. So now we're talking about young people. He said teenage girls like watching rom-coms because they can emotionally relate to them, even if they haven't experienced these emotions yet. Rom-coms don't just give youth hope that true love exists, but showcases what love can look like once they're older. So I really liked those quotes. I also have a quote from this website here. Awkward conversations or sassy monologues aren't just funny. They help out your ticker. Belly laughing can lower blood pressure as much as exercise does and can burn 40 calories per 10 minutes. Another quote I have here. Problems solved. You walk away in a much better mood thanks to a laughter-induced endorphin rush. A feel-good finale also puts the kibosh on stress hormones. In fact, and I love this, watching a romantic comedy before bed can help prevent insomnia. So, now I know the solution to my insomnia. I just gotta watch more rom-coms. And the last quote I have here is one study found that couples who watched, then discussed such films were more likely to still be a pair 3 years later. So there are just some quotes there that are proving why rom-coms are so popular in general. So if we love rom-coms so much, why is Hollywood doing them dirty? Oh my goodness. So now that we've talked about why they are generally loved and why my particular audience, my Instagram followers, think that the 90s rom-coms might be better, I do want to take a brief moment to talk about the history of the rom-com before we really get into things. So we're going to take a step back and we're going to look at the Greeks and Shakespeare. Way, way back, we've got the Greeks and Shakespeare, and they were the very first, well, maybe not the very first, but some of the very first to talk about love in a entertainment setting, to make a rom-com. And, we've got A Midsummer Night's Dream, The Taming of the Shrew, Twelfth Night, Much Ado About Nothing. All of these are Shakespeare rom-coms that have actually now been turned into some retellings. If you think about it, we've got 10 Things I Hate About You, which is a remake of The Taming of the Shrew. We have Twelfth Night, which was remade as She's the Man, and A Midsummer Night's Dream, I believe, was Bring It On. I can't remember particularly. If you're watching on YouTube, I will make sure to write down here what the actual name of that movie is, because I can't remember right now. But we started with Shakespeare. Shakespeare wrote some rom-coms. And then, of course, we have Jane Austen, who wrote Pride and Prejudice and rejuvenated the love for rom-coms. And she also wrote Emma, which is also another comedy, and she wrote Northanger Abbey, she wrote Persuasion, and they had various levels of rom-coms, but I would say she is what brought it into the modern era. We would not have rom-coms today in the same way, I don't think, if we did not have the classic Pride and Prejudice. You can argue with me if you want, but I'm pretty sure you're going to agree with me, because Pride and Prejudice is it's pretty solid. I think it's a pretty solid opinion that Pride and Prejudice is very popular and classic and has definitely impacted rom-coms today. So we have Jane Austen in the 1800s, and then we move on to the 20s and 30s, where we had comedies of manners. It was a type of rags to riches story, which was popular, of course, during the 20s and 30s. And a good example of this is It Happened One Night with Clark Gable. And it's a very sort of witty, slapstick little rom-com. It's black and white. It's definitely got the vibes. Then we've got screwball comedies, which were more popular in the later 30s and the early 40s. And they were characterized by their fast-paced storylines, their witty dialogue, and their slapstick scenes. They were often led by intelligent and headstrong female protagonists, not unlike Elizabeth Bennet from Jane Austen's Pride and Prejudice. What did I say? They definitely impacted our future. I just gonna say that. So we have the screwball comedies, and then we have the sex comedies of the 50s to 70s. These were a little more risque. The world was starting to be impacted by the sexual revolution, and so that definitely changed Hollywood. And so these were mostly characterized by the battle of the sexes. It dealt with the differences between men and women, and it often involved some kind of rivalry. I don't have an example, but if I think of one, I will put one on the video if you're watching on YouTube. So 50s and 70s, 60s and 70s. Then we have Molly Ringwald and Nora Ephron era, which was the 80s and 90s. So Molly Ringwald made multiple coming-of-age rom-coms in the 80s. We have 16 Candles. We have... oh goodness, I'm forgetting what the other one is, but but she made quite a few rom-coms. And then finally we come to the 90s, or rather 1989. We're right on the cusp there. We have Nora Ephron, who came onto the scene with the iconic When Harry Met Sally. And this is how we arrive at the classic age of rom-coms, the 90s. Thank you so much for watching part 1 of the rom-com renaissance, why we keep going back to the classics. As always, thank you so much for fangirling with me, and now go dream, my friend. Kisses. Mwah.